I talked a lot about skirmish games in my last video, which was a couple years ago, and how much fun they are to play. Less models means more to paint, and quality over quantity. Hundreds of these games exist, from Malifaux to Infinity and everything in between. These games focus on story and small squad based off of characters that you create. And one of the most popular games is Killteam by Games Workshop. Now those of you who know anything about Warhammer are probably confused. Killteam? Didn't they re-release that a couple years ago? What, 2021? Yeah, they did. But there's a few editions before this one, which laid the seeds of the re-release with tight skirmish rules, scaled down 40k combat, and narrative roles for each member of your team. I'm here to explain the history of Killteam, and why I believe the 2018 edition was such an interesting piece of Games Workshop history, and a great intro to Warhammer 40k. If you want to get technical, like my co-host Jack on my podcast, there were Killteam rules in some previous editions of Warhammer through 4th and 6th edition. But anyway, we're getting started with our journey in 2013 with Apocalypse, Killteam, which was a supplement for 6th edition of Warhammer, so I had to mention it for the first sliver of the game. We actually start everything off in 2016 with Warhammer Killteam, a standalone game in the release of 7th edition of Warhammer. The starter box pitted Ravengard versus Filthy Tau, sorry, just a little bit of bias, in squad-based combat. The edition built off the bones of the 2013 release of Warhammer 40k, with specialist leaders included with operatives. What differentiated this one from the 2013 edition was the expanse of even more factions, refined rules, and more narrative missions. To be honest, most of the community assumed that this would be like Assassinorum, which was a box game to push out plastic kits of assassins that weren't selling too much, or some of the new kits. But the game was fun and easy to pick up. The core value of the game itself had a developed fan base, and a few people still play it to this day. In 2017, Games Workshop released Shadow War Armageddon, a Necromunda-style game, and rule set that you could play with 40k miniatures. This was a sort of beta test for the 2017 release of Necromunda.
It's essentially Necromunda. It's been updated slightly, but most of the rules are the same as Necromunda.
But this technically isn't part of Killteam's history. I'm throwing it in here anyway because a lot of people kind of wanted an updated skirmish game for 40k. In 2018, Games Workshop would release a cryptic teaser, specifically around June. It got the community hyped. It mentioned kill teams and some kind of guard regiment that couldn't hold out any longer. The Mechanicus would be a part of it, but who could the aggressors be? And what would this game be? Would it replace Shadow War Armageddon, or maybe even the newly released Necromunda? Many wondered if this would actually be a new updated version of Killteam. And finally, we got the box contents revealed in July of 2018. We got a Skitarii Killteam with about tons of terrain. I mean, this was a great box if you ask anybody around at that time. It had a Skitarii Killteam, it had a Genestealer Cult Killteam, some great dice, and the rulebook included. And if you didn't want to buy the $170 box, the book was released separately for $40 and included many of the base factions that came out in the 2016 edition of the game, but along with some new teams, specifically for 8th edition, like Death Guard, Thousand Suns, and even the newly released Death Watch for Space Marines. The game was an absolute success, unexpectedly so. It had a thriving tournament scene and great casual play. Narrative was pretty alright. A lot of people played it, but it was pretty box standard with not a lot going on. It was a smashing success in bridging both skirmish game players and wargame players into one game. This is actually where I started playing 40k. I started things off with a Blood Angel Intercessor Killteam. I vividly remember crafting the roles and the names and the characters, even doing some little kit bashes. It was a super fun way to get started. This might sound stupid for someone that was pretty new, but it was a ton of fun to pick up just a couple models and build a team over a weekend or maybe even a day. I painted them, played my first game, and switched over to AdMech because Space Marines were bad. So the combat and rules were a hit, and it was just scaled down 40k essentially, just with less models and similar principles applied. The community asked Games Workshop, hey, this is great, but what happens next?
I am Lucia Vane, scion of the Vane Rogue Trader dynasty, and I am stranded here on Arcadia Neos. It was a colony world, a seed of hope in the gathering dark. Now, a poisoned paradise, overrun by the damned and the living dead. Look to the sky, and what do you see? Escape pods raining down. Survivors from the new dawn. That vessel was the flagship of my dynasty. A significant financial asset to my family. I was rather fond of it for sentimentality's sake, too. So how, you ask, did we wash up on this forsaken shore?
In August of that same year, Games Workshop answered with a small expansion, Killteam Rogue Traders. Space nobles, sly rogues, rejects, and noble lords who explore space and run into a new type of plague, the Gellerpox plague, or Gellerpox. Their ship is immediately besieged by the infected, and the dogged rogue traders must fight back in the corridors of the ship. They make it out alive? The game added 2 new factions, the Gellerpox Infected and Euclidean or Euslidian Starstriders, a new human faction. It was received with lukewarm success. The factions were okay, but people began wondering if this was just competitively viable, if both teams could be used in a competitive setting, which began to raise some alarms for a lot of casual gamers. Box was also a test run for something we'll get to later. In October 2018, Games Workshop released one of the 4 supplements for Killteam, Killteam Commanders. Now you could play with your commissars, tech priests, chaos lords, etc. But they weren't actually the leaders of your squad. Those would still be your Skitari sergeants or your Space Marine sergeants or whatever. So why release it? I mean, the fan response was that a lot of these missions could have just been in the original Killteam book. Maybe raise the price to $10 more instead of releasing a full-on mission pack and these expansion boxes. Overall, it was a pretty lackluster expanse to this cool skirmish game with a budding competitive community. And that community would grow. In January 2019, Killteam Arena would come out. Building off of the Rogue Trader Killteam rules for interior combat, the game was set in an indoor arena/dungeon that you designed with walls, doors, and tiles, kind of like a PvP Space Hulk. The rules and gameplay were excellent for competitive community players and narrative community too. I remember playing through a campaign with my AdMech team. We used the arena rules to destroy a biohive of Tyranids. It was by far a super fun and fantastic addition to Killteam, and a welcome addition to the game overall, and it's just what the community needed. Around this time, the main community was much more competitive than narrative, and casual players were kind of left in the dust. Games Workshop would release Killteam Elites, my personal and most of the community's favorite expansion to date. This overhauled the entire game and added in a ton of new units, new missions, and new rules. Space Marines could take Terminators and Elite Phobos units. Gene Stealers could take Aberrants. Chaos could take just so much stuff. And Tau could get access to Crisis Suits, and even some types of commanders. On top of that, a new faction dropped, Custodes. Now you could mix and match narrative lists, and players love taking these heavily armored units, or just a series of different striking scorpions if you're going to be an Eldar player. Building became so much fun, and you had so many options to choose from. You could make a swarm-style list, or a super elite list with just 4 models. Competitively, this sort of tossed a wrench into things. I'd argue this is where we see the decline of the game, with just the amount of units you could bring. After this release, the game would be pretty quiet. Not much would be touched for the rest of the year. At the end of the year in 2019, Games Workshop dropped an updated starter box for Killteam, featuring Reavers vs. Tau. We also got a chapter approved, featuring Sister of Battle units and Kroot units, and a third way to play featuring the Dread Ambull from Blackstone Fortress. In 2020, Games Workshop released a pack of dice and markers for Killteam. It seemed that the game would be over and relegated to the grave of quirky box games like Games of Camarog, Orc Racing, Shadow War, and all of those other weird Barnes & Noble games that they made overproduced kits for. This is actually a good time to enter a segue about how Games Workshop runs their quote-unquote boxed games section.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
They have tons of these: Titanicus, Aeronautica Imperialis, Warcry Underworlds, Legion Imperialis, and Blood Bowl. It seems that every year we get a game rotated in and out of this, and hyping up a huge release, and Imperialis specifically comes to mind. That was hyped up to no end, and I can't think of anybody that really was excited for it. There's no dig to Imperialis players, but really, just what was that? So here's a good example. In 2019, right around fall time, we had two new games come out, Warcry and Aeronautica Imperialis, a dogfighting airplane game. I remember going to my local GW store. I had to drive 30 minutes each way. The shop owner had a ton of these small Imperial fighters hanging from the ceiling in a massive papercraft Imperial Guard plane, along with a demo game. Killteam was pretty much shelved for the rest of the year, and shelved for Warcry. Aeronautica, not to say that this would replace Killteam, but it was definitely the one in the limelight. So a lot of people kind of thought that Killteam would ride out into the sunset after the end of 2019. We wouldn't really see anything from it. And that would mostly be the case. All through 2020, we would have nothing going on. Killteam was relegated to just this weird, obscure game, kind of like Blood Bowl at the time, until January 2021. In 2020, 40K got an update. 9th edition dropped. It was all about those Necrons. And we got a little bit of a sneak peek into the Pariah Nexus, one could say. Space Marine chat logs talking about the Pariah Nexus. Flayed ones, killing and skinning people alive. This was definitely tied into 9th edition. But what was it gonna be? Would we see new units? What would be in the new book? What would even be the box? Would it just be a primer, or would it be just a new set of teams? Nobody really knew. Everybody was hyped. It seemed like Killteam was going to be set for a comeback. Enter the Pariah Nexus. A brand new box. 12 miniatures in total. 5 brand new heavy intercessors, and a Gravis captain for Space Marines. 5 plastic flayed ones, and a Chronomancer for the Necrons. And some Necron terrain. All exclusive to this box. It seemed like they were trying to make this Mechanicus-style game on the tabletop. And well, they sure tried. The box didn't seem like it was enough. It seemed like they wanted to paywall these brand new models in a new box that people would have to buy. It was $200 on release, and that's just for the American market. I still see copies to this day rotting the shelves of my LGS. The base box game seemed completely unbalanced. 5 heavy intercessors, and a captain, versus 5 flayed ones and a Chronomancer. For context, Necron flayed ones are usually taken in squads of 10 or 20 in 40k. I think the contents were better and reflected the price if we probably got 10 flayed ones and the same Space Marine amount, or maybe even something similar to the Warcry release where we have super elite squads versus a larger group of fighters. The previous edition of the game was pretty balanced. Even the re-release they did in 2019 was still very balanced with the Reavers versus the Tau. Let me emphasize this for the community. They were excited. Everybody was pretty stoked. Some people that hadn't even played Killteam was really stoked. Check out some of these reviews that I found on some board game forums. The strategy for Pariah Nexus was all over the place. Who was this for? Was it for competitive players looking for a new way to play? Not really, Arena covered that. Was it for new players looking to build kill teams? Well, no, because both kill teams were super limited. So, who was this really for? Nobody really knew. Anyway, enough salt. Let's dive into the book for this expansion, the real reason a lot of people picked it up. In general, there was really only updates to a lot of the Space Marine and Necron parts, which, go figure. They added some new units like the Blade Guard and Necron Destroyers, which could be taken. Which seemed pretty flavorful, and just begs the question, why didn't we get a box like that? That would have been way cooler. Space Marines finally got a -1 AP to their melee weapons, and Necrons finally got more balanced resurrection protocols. It seemed like a great expansion for just these two factions and nobody else. There were scenarios and missions, one of the reasons a lot of people played it. These seemed actually pretty decent, could be a great one-shot in a campaign. If you've ever played Mechanicus, you'd know exactly where I'm getting this. They even added environmental hazards like toxic sewage, water, anti-gravity, road Gauss tech. There's a lot of really great pieces here that seem like it would have made a great box game, but it was over-corporatized, over-monetized, and made for profit. A classic GW move, really. And simply comparing the prices to this upcoming game, Cursed City, it's no question. Both had the same price tag. Cursed City got 54 models in a full new game. Yeah, I'll take one of those. Can't really think of anybody that really was excited for this box. Most people split it with a friend, and even then, there's not much to split. Most people either sold it on eBay, or just kept half the units, or just kind of thugged it out with what they had. I can kind of think that a lot of people were really shaken away by this, and it was a very early sign of how Games Workshop would do things now, with their new Army release boxes, or the Versus boxes with one character. Overall, it was designed to just make money. Games Workshop never really had the interest of Killteam in mind. So for most people, March 2021 marked the end of Killteam, and it would remain that way for a while. Warhammer Fest went on with no new reveals for Killteam, and Games Workshop pushed out Age of Sigmar 3rd Edition. And that seemed really the end of the story. So, let's break down why Killteam 2018 failed, quote-unquote. In a way, Killteam was a victim of its own success. What was supposed to be a one-off box game for a year or two evolved into a massively popular and competitive game with edits, erratas, and updates to carry it into 9th edition of 40k, with new Space Marines and Necron units. Like Titanicus, Warhammer Underworlds, and Necromunda, the game took on a life of its own with a massive player base. Eager to appease this new crowd and new scene of gamers, Games Workshop would introduce new expansions, factions, and way to play. These expansions would overcomplicate and eventually break the game, with an already delicate rule set that was essentially just 8th edition scaled down. Things like elite units were fun, but they did break the game. Commanders add an extra layer of depth for no real reason, and Pariah Nexus was just a cash grab. With the expansion bloat finally setting in, and new game systems hungry to take its place, Killteam needed to change. That summer, I vividly remember dusting off the old 2018 rulebook, calling up my friends and assembling my Killteam for a weekend of skirmish madness. We were all set. I painted up a new Deathwatch army to fight the Xenos and Traitors. My friends were excited to revisit the old legend of a game. The day before we were all about to throw down, we saw this. Killteam was back. I was so excited. We all met up that next day to play Killteam and chatting about that godly trailer and the new factions in it. The stalwart, emotionless Deathcore of Krieg versus the cunning but brutal Orc Commandos. That weekend reignited my love for the game and made me re-pore over those old books. And that's when I began working on this video. September 2021. Killteam Day was here. I got my copy and my pre-order bonus of dog tags and split the orcs with my buddy. The box was remarkable. It was $200, much like Pariah Nexus, but it had an amazing set of orc terrain and a board to go with these new gorgeous models. The presentation was amazing. If you're into unboxing or just player feedback or just initial impressions, this is an A+. It was great. I was blown away, but there were some storm clouds brewing. When Killteam was given its own game, the core concept was 40k scaled down. Everything from weapon profiles, movements, and even stratagems. Instead of having a squad of 10 guardsmen with 10 shots, you'd have one guardsman with 2 shots with the last gun, and a personal stat line for that fighter. I spoke with a few of my friends about each edition and what they liked and disliked. Both the community and the players, and my friends, we all liked bringing different types of units. Tau with stealth suits and pathfinders, or Plague Marines with legions of Poxwalkers. It made each Killteam feel individualistic with the mix of stat lines. I think Pete the Wargamer's custom Space Marine Killteam exemplifies this perfectly. But in Killteam 2021, at least at the start, you could only run one type of unit per Killteam. Things like Deathwatch could only take 5 veterans. Luckily, this wasn't too much of a change, as you could outfit them with a litany of weapons. But Guardsmen, you were relegated to just taking that amount of Guardsmen, with different specialists. Orcs benefited from it pretty well too, But if you look at some things like Gene Stealer Cult, where you're just bringing a bunch of these hybrids, they all look pretty much the same, it gets kind of tiresome quickly. A lot of veteran players were wondering where the customization went, and they'd have to wait a while for a real answer. But before we get into that, let's take a quick segue into books.
I hate books.
When Killteam 2.0 launched, it launched with 2 books, the core rules and the compendium. The compendium was $50, the core rules were $40. Luckily, the core rules were put in the box that a lot of people bought, so you already had the rules right there, along with this weird campaign book called Octarius. Luckily, this included the rules for your commandos and your guardsmen. Surely they wouldn't do this for every expansion, right? More importantly, if you wanted to play a compendium team, you had to buy the compendium book and the rule book. Previously, everything was just put into the rulebook for Killteam 1.0, so that's pretty annoying. Imagine having to buy a $200 box and then spend $50 to play other teams. That's kinda lame. Bad move, Games Workshop. But let's get back into this metamorphosis of Killteam. Coming from 2018 into the 2021 version, there's a lot of things that are different. The new Killteam is solid and has some nice fixes, especially dealing with the previous bloat. Killteam 2021 does a great job at making each team feel unique. Weapons profiles, special abilities. Each unit feels great to use. Snipers actually feel like snipers for once. Heavy weapons finally feel way less swingy. And a lot of the cover rules were kind of strange. Still to this day, they're very nebulous and a lot of players argue about them. Luckily, you can bring barricades and set them up at the beginning of the game, so if you're screwed over with a board layout, you can throw some barricades down and call it good. Do you know what really frightens a wargamer?
Shit, you already know I'm obsessed with it. I can't get enough. Back with another milk. Help! Help! Help me! Help!
Shapes. That's right. Killteam got rid of the number-based system of inches and introduced these strange shapes, a la Fantasy Flight style. This was done mostly to ditch numbers, imperial versus metric type of discussion, and limit rules bloat. How far does a guardsman move? 1 hexagon. How far does that weapon shoot? Oh, it's a square. And luckily, the game actually came with measuring tools that would all fix this for you. And if you still don't like it, there are conversion sites out there to change it and switch it back up. Personally, I don't really like using them, but I got over it pretty quick. And it does make the game streamlined a little bit faster. I have a theory that this was done to limit the amount of people that would actually be turned off. It's much easier to get into a board game when you don't have to think about mathematical numbers and how far away something is. You can throw a shape at it and call it good. Warcry has something kind of similar to it with the range system that they use, and removing cover saves and armor saves. So, with that in mind, it seems like Games Workshop was setting this up for long term, something similar to Necromunda or Blood Bowl. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at the expansions that they dropped ever since the beginning of the game. You know, after you had the Octarius sector, you had Chalnath, which was great, Nachmund, which was also fantastic, and then you have everything with Into the Dark, which is just my favorite. If you ask me, Into the Dark is peak Killteam. It's what it always wanted to be. If you look back all the way to Killteam Arena, it was all done internally. It was all in an arena. Now you can build and modulate the arenas yourselves. And on top of that, some teams really thrive in this environment, like the Navis Breachers, the Dark Eldar Cabalites, and even the Kasserkins to an extent. It's really cool to see a team that was designed for open play shine immensely well in close quarters combat within Into Dark. Now granted, the buy-in for this was very expensive, because you got an entire set of walls, bulkheads, scatter terrain, and boards to set up the game with. But Into the Dark was so successful, it spawned boarding actions for Warhammer 40k, which is, in my opinion, the best way to play Warhammer 9th Edition. It's awesome. So, Killteam really was kind of killing it with the releases here, if you need more proof that this game was going to be built to last. The expansions added in with some of these other teams like the Votan, the Arbites, and the Chaos Beastmen, all of these were asked for by the community from years ago. And on top of that, they really interact with the terrain very well. You can bust through walls, weld doors shut, launch escape pods, You could have a gunfight in the bridge of a Space Hulk with Space Hulk terrain. That's fantastic. The supplement Into Dark did something that most of Killteam 1.0 couldn't ever do, and that's bridge the narrative and competitive gap. Now it felt like you were fighting through a rusted old Space Hulk with a crew of players that you felt attached to. Leading all of this is the rules for narrative, where you could have a base, you could have a squad quirk, a battle scar, a backstory. Every player and warrior felt unique, the way you kitted them out. It was all fantastic. A lot of players kind of slowly adjusted to the new rules, now understanding that instead of taking an Ogren in your squad, the fighter, the guy with the trench hammer, was your new melee guy. Still, it was the baseline of an Imperial Guardsman. However, each guardsman had a job. You weren't spamming 50 guardsmen with las rifles anymore. You now had specialists. And let me tell you, specialists really flared up how people play the game. Unfortunately, if you were playing a compendium team, you were relegated to some pretty basic stuff, like the Tyranids. They still, at the time of recording, don't have a special type of kill team. So you're stuck with 3 warriors or an army of Gene Stealers. That kind of sucks. So a lot of compendium armies were left in the dust, a relic of a bygone age of people that just wanted to play with what minis they had. Gone were the days of going out and buying a box and trying to kit bash it into a kill team. Luckily, this was replaced with buying a kill team box with a specific type of team with specific types of specialists, all included within the box. Specialist teams also had specialist orders and specialist tac ops that they could take. My personal favorite is the Dark Eldar take prisoners, where after a player is out of action, you can kidnap that player and they're never seen again. They're taken prisoner by the Dark Eldar, which is very, very flavorful. There's a ton of these, and they drop tac op packs all the time. They change how people play. So, I think it's an okay addition. I don't think you should really buy them. You'd probably just go pirate them. In combination with the narrative elements, the competitive elements are also just a slam dunk. Tactical and strategic ploys are a great way that any team can score these objectives. They can be expanded with different decks, and they again vary by faction. So you take a game that was mostly about like fighting people, killing people, being on wounds, and it turns into a scoring game. Suddenly you don't have to have as much killing power within your faction. You just need to outscore the other guy. And this allows some teams to really shine, and some to really kind of fail, but that's all the way up on the commander, whoever's piloting this kill team. And that, in essence, is what makes a great competitive game. The fact that you can take any faction and still try to defeat or outscore a meta list based off of your skill as a player. When I started working on the script of this video in 2022, I was pretty heartbroken that I couldn't just grab a couple of minis that were different units from a different faction, such as a Space Marine with a couple of Terminators, or a bunch of Eliminators and Phobos guys. I was kind of bummed, actually, that a lot of these units just looked like it was the same miniature type with different roles. Some units did a good job. The Orcs have very great detail and individuality within the Commandos range. The Eldar Corsairs are fantastic, and they all look like they perform different roles. Space Marines, once again, like in Killteam 1.0, got the short end of the stick. A lot of their teams look super basic looking. The Phobos Marines all just look like Phobos Marines with different weapons. The Scouts, it's the same story. It was really just an excuse to release new Scout sculpts, which, you know, they needed, but yeah. I really thought a lot of Killteam would just be these similar looking kits fighting each other with different roles. But I got proven wrong again. And that's why this video took so long, because I actually had to sit down and play the new Killteam and see what I thought about it. So that's why it took so long. I had a really big love-hate relationship with this. Of course, yeah, I bought the new box because I love Deathgore of Krieg. And my favorite thing about Killteam 1.0 was just taking a handful of minis and making a team out of it. But it seemed like the play for Killteam 2.0 was just grabbing that box of minis or that compendium team and just playing through it, assigning them different weapons. Even some of the White Dwarf updates and special mini teams, like the Cult of the Rusted Claw and that fucking Harlequin one. Man, that one was annoying. But still, the point still stands. I kind of felt turned off that I couldn't mix and match these different units. Luckily, Killteam 2.0 provided. If you look at teams like the Warriors of Cain or the Bloodied, you have these special units that do special things. And even in the case of Warriors of Cain, you can take different miniatures and mix and match them, just like I wanted, which was really damn cool to see. You can even see this earlier with some of the other teams, like the Inquisitorial Kill Team. Now, let's talk about Ashes of Faith. I think a lot of people forget about this one because like 6 people in the world got it, but it allowed you to play a Chaos Cultist team and a Inquisitorial Kill Team. What I really like about these is that it embodies the spirit of Killteam 1.0 immensely, where you can grab a couple of boxes or spend a lot of time kit bashing a team together, having your Chaos Lord or Traitor Commissar look the way he wants to, or having your Inquisitor field a bunch of Scions along with a couple of other Inquisitorial Interrogators. It all lends itself to the spirit of the player and what you, the player, want to do. After all, these are your guys going on their adventure, so why shouldn't they look the way you want them to look? And that's what's really great about the Ashes of Faith expansion. It was entirely narrative, didn't add a lot to competitive, and it felt like something you would have gotten in Killteam 1.0. That really kind of piqued my interest again and wanted me to take a look at this game specifically. And I gotta say, it's a great bridging of both systems. Truly, Killteam 1.0 had some great groundwork laid. 2018, they laid out the small squad gameplay. It was highly addictive and super fun. Spent a lot of time making their kill teams, playing kill teams, going to tournaments, etc. But the rules book really did set in and definitely ruined the game for a lot of people, made it almost intolerable to play. Because by the end of Killteam 1.0, you had these lists that just could take all comers. And not in a fun way, where it was just 3 Tau rail rifles and a ton of drones. That was a huge pain in the ass, and I'm glad it's gone. Now, in its place, you have a Tau Pathfinder kill team, with a specific type of playstyle, with special units that can do various things. So, Killteam 2.0 definitely complements the first game, took away what didn't work, and added in some new things that now make a lot of these things work. I'm thoroughly a fan, but I do have some complaints about Killteam 2.0. The cover feels very nebulous, and sometimes pointless to have, or it's just super overcomplicated. Having set terrain packs can also be really annoying and kill the vibe of the game. And teams like the Navis Breachers can absolutely crush in Into the Dark, but flounders heavily in open play, which is somewhat to be expected. But some kill teams feel incredibly gimmicky, like the Intercession team. Those are all Space Marine teams. It's just called Intercession team. Just give me a Space Marine team that I can swap operatives in and out with. Don't call it Intercession team, because then I have to take a bunch of Chainsword Space Marines or a bunch of Bolter Space Marines. At that point, I'd like to have a nice mix of both. This is what I'm talking about. Recently, they did this. There's a team of just Space Marine heroes. If you were lucky enough to get the Space Marine heroes blind boxes, and you made a team out of all of those, then you got that special team that I've been looking for. It even had a heavy intercessor and a Space Marine Phobos sniper. So it's really all I wanted, but they still lock all this away behind this Intercession squad thing. Some factions like Tyranids, Death Guards, and Demons are just hung out to dry with no real support either. You're stuck with a compendium team. It's just not great for them. Having a rulebook and a compendium separate is really stupid. Original Killteam had the rules for the game right there and the baseline teams in one book. I checked. The original Killteam book had more pages by about 30 more pages, and it was much, much cheaper than the new book. Buying both books in USD will run you $110 collectively, not factoring any of the expansions for teams. But, I brought that up earlier. Surely those books wouldn't become a problem like Octarius, Chalnoth, Nockmund, the Bloodied One, Into the Dark, all of the Into the Dark special books afterwards, including the Arbites one. Again, if you want to play any of these specialist teams, you have to buy one of these $50 books just to get half of the rules. It really kind of sucks. So, if you wanted to play Dark Eldar, let's say, you got to go buy the team. That's $50-ish. And then you have to go buy the book. That's another $50 to play. That's more than your standard rate on a video game. And that's just for one team. So, this is a common thing that Games Workshop does. I mean, all through 9th edition, those campaign books were a huge pain in the ass. But again, that's almost $100 in price tags if you're going to buy the official books. Killteam doesn't do things like data cards, like Warcry. That would make it a lot more fun. Killteam 1.0 was the same way, but that was a much more pen and paper experience. Everything was in that one big book, and you could just buy the expansions as much as you'd like. So, Games Workshop seems hell-bent on making you pay through the nose for everything in this game, and just don't even get me started on the themed dice, man. Yeah. Killteam 2.0 definitely has a lot of other problems that weren't exactly inherited from 1.0, but just problems with the company realizing that, hey, we have players and they have money, so let's make them pay through the nose for everything. To wrap this video up though, I think the new Killteam is pretty good as a skirmish game. You could maybe hang with some of the other skirmish big boys like Malifaux, Guild Ball, Infinity, but part of me still misses that old style of Killteam where you buy a handful of models from your own army or just grab a couple of guys, throwing them onto a small kill zone against somebody else and fighting for victory. Man, I remember my very first Killteam of Blood Angels. I bought the easy to build Reaver and Intercessor kits, and that was my team. That was about $30 in total because they were easy to build stuff. Later on, I found a lone scout sniper and figured I'd just casually add him to my kill team. The fact that I could add an alternate unit and just a different model made it feel really fun. While Killteam has morphed into something new, I still miss that old style, even if it was bloated and horribly disfigured. Games Workshop, for once, actually stuck the landing pretty well in the remake of Killteam and turned it into something nice. Killteam has evolved from whatever you had in terms of a squad of Marines or Orcs, and now it's a hyper-competitive, kind of 40k version of Warcry if you look at it. New Killteam is fantastic. I mean, I can't recommend it enough. If you guys have anything you want to add to this or just want to argue with me in my video or just hit me with an actually, comment below. Other than that, guys, I'll see you in the next video. We'll see what that's going to be. Hopefully it's not a year and a half in terms of the process. Take care, everybody.